Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. In today's episode, I'm sharing 5 disturbing true horror stories from Canada. Encounters on quiet roads, deep forests, and lonely lakes that turn far more dangerous than anyone expected. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, like, and share to support the channel. Thank you all. Now then, let's begin. I wasn't planning to tell this story. Not because it was too horrific, but because I don't think anyone would really understand the feeling unless they've lived through something like it. That creeping certainty that you're not truly alone. Even when everything logical in you insists it's fine. And maybe what unsettles me most is this: it didn't start strange. Everything was normal. So normal it made me careless. That's always when it happens, isn't it? When you think you've got control. My name's Jack Miller. I'm 34, a mining engineer based out of Prince George. That fall, I was contracted to survey an abandoned gold mine deep in the Caribou Mountains. The site had been shut down since the 60s, and the company just needed updated structural reports. It was supposed to be a quick solo job. No crew, no noise. I drove out in early November, just before snow season. The forest was still dry and brittle then. The sky flat and gray the whole drive-in. The mine sat almost 10 kilometers off the main road, reachable only by an old service trail. By the time I reached the clearing, it was already mid-afternoon. The lot was empty. No tire tracks, no other vehicles. Just trees, rocks, and silence. Near the entrance, I noticed a flat boulder with something on top, a broken headlamp strap. The elastic was torn, caked in dust, but the light itself still gave off a weak, flickering glow. It was cold to the touch. I slipped it into my pocket, assuming someone left it behind on an old job. The first day went smoothly. I walked the main tunnels, took stability readings, collected core samples, and shot some footage for documentation. By sundown, I had set up camp near the entrance. Small stove, tent, thermal bag. I'd done this kind of thing dozens of times. That night I woke up to nothing. No sound, no movement, no real reason. Just a pressure in my chest like my body had sensed something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. I stayed still, staring into the dark, listening, a soft rustling, not steady, not loud, like something shifting just outside the tent. Then stopping, then starting again, further off. I reached for my flashlight and scanned the perimeter, but nothing stood out. The trees didn't move. The air was still. After a few minutes, I chalked it up to nerves and lay back down. The next morning, I circled the camp. The dirt was soft from a recent frost melt, and near the rear of the tent I found impressions in the ground. Not footprints, more like drag marks. Uneven and shallow, like someone or something had crawled across on their belly. A little further back, I found a clear handprint. Human, pressed into damp earth, fingers spread. I checked my pack. The outer compartment had been opened. One of my food pouches was missing, but nothing else was touched. No tearing, no claw marks. The zipper had been pulled cleanly. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a scavenger. But I'd never seen an animal unzip a pack that precisely, and there had been no other tire tracks, no footprints, no signs of anyone hiking through this area recently. I broke camp and decided to shift location. Instead of heading back down the main trail, I took a maintenance road that looped around to the far end of the mine. There used to be a monitoring station there decades ago, now long shut down. I figured if someone else was creeping through the area, they wouldn't bother going that far out. The path was rough. Roots and frozen ruts shook the frame of the truck the entire way. But when I got there, the space felt cleaner. No signs of recent activity. No drag marks. No strange objects. I backed the truck near a low dirt ridge, ate a cold dinner, and double-checked everything under the hood before night fell. This time, I didn't pitch a tent. That night, I slept in the truck. I should have turned back. The moment I saw that handprint behind the tent, That should have been the end of it. But I kept telling myself that going forward was safer than heading back through the place where everything had already gone wrong. That, if I could just make it to the far end of the site, I'd be out of reach from whatever or whoever had been there the night before. And maybe if I kept calling it someone or something, it would feel manageable. Just one more night out here. One more night and I could finish the job and leave it behind. I drove along the old maintenance road with both hands locked tight on the wheel. The forest thickened around me in uneven walls of dark green and gray. Branches, brushing the sides of the truck, as if the trees were leaning in to listen. Every so often I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see movement behind me. Nothing came. When the woods finally opened into the clearing, I remembered from the survey maps. I felt a strange kind of relief. The ground was bare except for frost and scattered leaves. No tire tracks. No footprints. No signs of anyone passing through in months. It felt untouched in a way the first campsite hadn't. I backed the truck against a small rise in the earth until the rear bumper nearly kissed the slope. The spot felt sheltered and harder to approach without making noise. I stepped out, walked a full circle around the clearing, and found nothing out of place. For a moment, I let myself believe I had outrun the unease. I didn't set up the tent. I decided I would sleep in the truck that night. It felt safer, more solid, harder for anything to slip into. I spread my sleeping bag across the back seats and laid the flashlight and pocket knife beside me. The routine calmed me more than I expected. Dinner was quick, cold, straight from a pouch. When the sun dipped behind the ridge, the forest seemed to settle into its own heavy silence. I climbed into the truck, locked the doors, checked them a second time, then closed my eyes. Exhaustion dragged me under in minutes. I don't know how much time passed before the world felt wrong again. It was not a sound that woke me. It was breath. Warm breath. Shallow and close. The kind of breath you only hear when someone is inches from your face. My eyes snapped open. He was there. Inside the truck, in the passenger seat, leaning forward between the two front headrests until his face hovered just above mine. His skin was stretched thin across sharp bone. His lips were cracked and peeling. His hair clung to his forehead in oily strips, but his eyes were the part that stopped my heart. Wide, unblinking, fixed on mine, like he had been watching me sleep for a very long time. Something broke inside me, very deep. From somewhere inside me, the scream tore out of my throat before I realized it belonged to me. My body reacted in wild, frantic waves. I kicked without direction, my legs caught in the sleeping bag. Boots slamming into the back of the passenger seat. My hands clawed at anything my fingers could reach, sliding off the headrest, scraping along the window, grasping for a weapon or an escape. I could not control myself. Every muscle shook. I felt my heel strike something soft on his side. He let out a low, ragged grunt, a sound that was somewhere between pain and anger. His face tightened for a moment, lips curling back. Then he dropped. He folded down toward the floor and moved the way I had feared since the first night. Not upright, not running, crawling, hands and feet, fast and low like an animal. I watched him slip through the open passenger door and disappear into the forest, swallowed by the dark. The sound of his movement faded almost instantly. I sat there shaking, trapped between shock and terror. My breath felt too loud in the still air of the truck. My hands wouldn't unclench from around the flashlight. Even when the beam wavered against the dashboard, I waited until the first thin light of morning spilled across the clearing before I stepped out. That was when I saw it. On the hood of the truck, placed neatly in the frost, sat the missing food pouch from the first night, and beside it, written in uneven black strokes across the dusted metal, were two words: go home. I packed everything without thought. My hands trembled so badly I dropped the keys twice. I climbed into the truck and started driving before the engine had even warmed. When the road curved back toward the main highway, I checked the mirror one last time. He was there, in the trees, running parallel to the truck, not chasing, just keeping pace with me. his body shifting between the trunks like he knew exactly how to stay half hidden. When I slowed, he slowed. When I accelerated, he vanished behind the thicker cluster of pines. I did not stop again, and I did not look back. My name's Emily Ross. I'm 29. I live alone in Toronto, and I wasn't supposed to be on that road. I told everyone I needed a break. But the truth is I was driving north to Timmins after a blow-up with my ex. I didn't want to explain myself. I just needed distance. It was mid-January and the roads were as empty as I'd hoped. Highway 89 was 2 lanes of snow and silence, framed by frozen trees like they were watching. I had a hot thermos wedged in the passenger seat, an old playlist humming through weak car speakers, and the soft crackle of a local AM station just within range. There was something oddly peaceful about it all. About an hour in, I passed a truck pulled off on the shoulder, one of those boxy old pickups. Engine still running, hazard lights flashing against the snow like a slow heartbeat. There was a person standing behind it, barely moving, just watching me as I drove by. I remember thinking they looked like a statue. I told myself it was probably someone who'd slid off or stopped to help. It's Ontario. We do that. But something about how still he was made me grip the wheel tighter. I turned the radio up and kept going. The clouds were rolling in heavier, dulling the afternoon light. I checked the dashboard clock. I still had a few hours until dark, but the snow was falling faster than before. My tires skidded once when I tried to brake gently near a bend. There was a small pull-off with a faded picnic sign, so I eased in to check my GPS. No signal. I stared at the frozen screen for a few seconds before locking the phone and tossing it on the seat. I didn't want to admit I was already lost. I got back on the road. Slower this time. The wind had picked up, carrying that kind of snow that doesn't fall straight but swirls in every direction. A few minutes later, I spotted red lights ahead. Another vehicle. I squinted. It was the same pickup. I stared hard through the windshield. I hadn't passed it. I knew I hadn't. There was no turnoff it could have used to get ahead of me. No gas station or shortcut. It didn't make sense. The radio began to fade in and out. Static crept between the songs like whispers trying to break in. I turned it off. The silence felt sharper. That's when I saw it. A glove. Just one. Sitting right in the center of the road. It looked fresh, like someone had dropped it a second ago. I swerved slightly to avoid it, and my tires crunched hard against packed ice. My breath fogged the glass as I leaned forward, trying to stay calm. It's just snow and nerves, I told myself. That's all. But I couldn't shake it. I kept glancing in the mirror, the glove, the truck, the figure standing too still, the empty road that kept looping like a bad dream. Then, just ahead, taillights again. This time, they weren't parked off to the side. They were dead center, blocking both lanes. Same truck, no doubt. I slowed to a crawl. The snowbank on either side was too deep to turn into. I was boxed in. The truck sat there, idling, its hazard lights blinking in that same steady rhythm. The driver's side door creaked open. A man stepped out, heavy boots, crunching into the snow. His jacket was fur-lined and zipped to the neck. I couldn't see his face. He raised one hand, slowly. Something glinted. I thought it was a phone until he started angling toward the passenger side of my car. That was when I saw his hand grip the door handle. My fingers tightened around the wheel. I glanced in the mirror. Behind me, the second figure had crouched low. At first I thought he'd slipped, but then I saw his arm jerk forward toward my rear tire. There was a sound like a quick rip, a hiss. My chest seized up. I saw my tire being cut. I moved before I thought, threw the car into park, grabbed the hockey stick from the passenger seat, and shoved the door open with all my weight. The cold hit me like a wall, but I was already in motion. I swung wide and caught the man behind the car across the upper back. He let out a grunt and tumbled sideways into the snow-filled ditch. My breath came hard and hot in the frozen air. I turned and ran. The man at the passenger side shouted something behind me, but I didn't stop to listen. The wind hit me like a slap. I could barely see 3 feet ahead. My boots sank deep with every step, the cold biting into my jeans, my breath loud in my ears. All I could hear was the crunch of snow and the panic pounding through my chest. I don't know how far I ran. The road was behind me. Trees ahead. Nothing else. I tripped on a root or maybe ice, and my knee slammed into something sharp and frozen. I let out a noise I didn't recognize, grabbed the spot, and kept going anyway. That's when I saw it, a shape in the trees. Low, hunched, half covered in snow. It looked like a shed or maybe an old trail shelter. I didn't care what it was. I made it inside and pushed the door shut behind me. There was a bench against one wall, half rotted but solid enough. I dragged it in front of the door, chest heaving. My hands shook so bad I dropped the stick twice. It was pitch black. The cold had followed me in, wrapped around me like wet cloth. I pulled out my flashlight, thumbed it on. It flickered once, then went dark. I crouched in the corner, stick gripped in both hands, my back pressed to the frozen wall. Every muscle in me was locked tight. My ears strained for sound. Outside, I hear it. Footsteps, one at a time. Crunch, crunch. They stop. Then the knock comes. One knock. Then two close together. Pause. Then one again. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock. It happens again. Same pattern. Same pace. I don't move. Don't even breathe. I feel the cold climbing inside me. Bone deep. Slow and certain. It repeats. Knock. Knock, knock. Pause. Knock. I don't scream. I don't dare. Time stops meaning anything. The rhythm becomes all I know. It slows down after a while, gets softer. Then nothing. Silence. I wait. I count to 60. Twice. Then 10 more. Still nothing. At some point, I close my eyes. I wake to daylight leaking through the cracks. My knees hurt. My back is numb. I wait another few minutes before I move the bench and open the door. The snow outside is fresh, but the footprints are still there. Circles around the shelter. Tight, almost touching the walls. Then they trail off, into the trees. I didn't follow them. I just walked. Limped. Really. Until I hit the highway again and flagged down a snowplow that nearly didn't see me. They asked what happened. I said I slipped. I made something up about my car. I couldn't make the words come out right. 6 months later and I still flinch when I see hazard lights. I can't drive in winter. I can't pass a parked car without my throat closing up. And every time I unlock my car door, I check the back seat first. Then I lock it again before I shift into drive. I survived the storm. I really did. But every time I see those blinking lights in the snow, I still don't feel safe. Before we step into the next story, if you're still here, still listening, with the lights low, maybe drop a comment. Just tell me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. All right, let's keep going. I wasn't planning to tell this story, but every time I see the surface of a quiet lake under moonlight, it comes back to me. The reminder that sometimes we go seeking peace, thinking we're the ones in control, when really, we're just visitors. And I still wonder if we ever truly know what lives beneath still water. It was early September when Alex and I drove up to Lake Okanagan. Just a few days. That was the plan. A quiet break from the city and a way to mark 2 years since our mother passed. He'd been planning it for weeks. Found the cabin, prepped the gear, even checked the water currents. The drive from Vancouver was longer than I remembered, but the air felt different as soon as we arrived. It was cooler, cleaner, the kind of quiet that settles in your chest. The cabin was tucked near a narrow inlet on the less touristy side of the lake. No other cars, no boats, just pine and water. That afternoon, we took the canoe out. The surface was calm, glassy. Alex handled the paddle while I leaned back and let the breeze carry us deeper into the bay. It was peaceful in that slightly eerie way silence can be when you're surrounded by water. About 20 minutes in, something bobbed to the surface on our right. I thought it was driftwood at first, but when we got closer, I saw it was a canoe paddle. Old, half-rotten, the handle chipped. Etched into the flat of the blade was a carved image of something serpent-like. Long body, curling tail, open mouth. Alex said, "Ogopogo," with a grin. "You know the lake monster story, right?" I rolled my eyes. "Local legend. Every lake has one." Still, I pulled the paddle into the canoe, more curious than anything else. The carving was worn but deep, probably a souvenir someone dropped, or maybe something older. I propped it under the seat and didn't think much more of it. That night, we lit a fire just outside the cabin. No cell signal, no music, just us, the stars, and the faint slosh of water against the rocks. Alex made hot chocolate on the camp stove and started telling me about old Inuit stories, ones that predated the Ogopogo myth. He said some tribes believed the lake had moods, that if you disrespected it, it wouldn't just drown you, it would remember you. I laughed, told him he'd been watching too many horror videos again, but I could feel how still the lake had become behind us. No wind, no insects, just a kind of hush that made my voice sound too loud. Later, just before bed, we decided to go out once more. Just a short paddle. The sky was that kind of deep purple you only get right after sunset. We didn't speak much, just floated. At one point, I heard a faint tapping sound, like metal clicking against wood. Alex turned, thinking it was me, but I hadn't moved. We looked around. There was nothing. Just the mirror of the lake and the distorted reflection of our canoe beneath us. I said it was probably a submerged rock shifting with the current. Or fish. Something ordinary. We drifted a bit more, then turned back. When we got to shore, everything was exactly how we left it. The cabin door was locked. The lights were off. I felt silly for being tense. Alex fell asleep fast. I lay awake longer than I wanted to, listening for that sound again. But all I heard was the occasional ripple and the distant rustle of trees. Until something changed. I woke sometime in the middle of the night, not from a sound, but from the way the air felt. Colder, heavier. Then, suddenly, I heard it. A rush of water, fast and hard, like something big cutting through the lake right past the cabin. I sat up, heart racing. Alex was still asleep. I moved to the window, peeled back the curtain just enough to see the shoreline. Nothing at first. Then a shape. Large, dark, gliding silently across the water. Not fast, not slow, just passing through, like it didn't care who saw it. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. Then it was gone. No splash, no echo, just stillness again. In the morning, the canoe had shifted from where we'd left it. Just a few feet, but it was obvious. One of the sides had a long scrape across the wood. Narrow, shallow, like something had dragged along it. Almost like claws. I told Alex we should go. He looked at the sky, then the long road ahead, and said it made more sense to wait until afternoon. I didn't argue, but I started packing anyway. We agreed to take the canoe out one last time, just to move it up the shoreline and leave everything ready for a quick departure. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both moved faster than usual, like our bodies knew something we hadn't admitted yet. The water was still, but colder now, and a thin mist curled along the edges of the bay. As we paddled, I noticed how quiet it had become. No birdsong, no insects. Just the soft dip of the paddle and the way it echoed far too long before fading. By the time we returned to shore, the mist had thickened around the trees, and a breeze had picked up that hadn't been there minutes earlier. That was when I saw it, on the grass just beyond the cabin steps. A set of footprints. Damp, dark, and clearly not ours. Barefoot, but far too large for a normal person. And fresh. Like someone had walked out of the lake and stopped just short of our door. I called Alex over, pointed silently. He stared for a long time without speaking, then said, "Maybe it's from yesterday. Someone passing through." But we both knew that wasn't true. The cabin had been locked. No one had come or gone, and nothing about these prints looked old. We started throwing our gear into bags. No folding, no organizing, just grabbing and stuffing and checking the car keys more than once. Alex tried to keep his voice light. "Just a weird thing. That's all. Soon as we hit the highway, it'll feel normal again." I wanted to believe that. We agreed to leave at first light, sleep a few hours, get everything in the car, and go just before sunset. I walked back inside the cabin to grab the last of our things. My pack, my phone, the headlamp. That was when I saw it, sitting in the center of the cabin table, placed neatly, facing the door. The old paddle, the one with the serpent carving. We had left it under the seat in the canoe. I stood there, not moving, not even thinking, just staring. I don't know how long I stayed like that. But when Alex called from outside, my throat was too dry to answer. We left before sunrise. The road out wrapped along the edge of the lake, a narrow gravel path that ran tight between trees and water. We drove in silence. The mist had followed us. It clung low to the road, curling up against the tires like smoke. Alex flicked the headlights to high beam as the forest grew thicker. Then he hit the brakes. The car slid forward on the gravel, jerking slightly before coming to a stop. There was someone in the road, a man, standing completely still in the mist, halfway between the trees. His clothes were soaked. His arms hung at his sides. And, in one hand, he held the paddle. The same one. Alex didn't say a word, just stared. The man's head tilted slowly. Then his neck turned farther than it should have, bending toward us. He looked straight into the windshield, straight at me. My voice broke first. "Go," I said, then louder. "Go now." Alex slammed the gas. The tires spit rocks and dust as we sped past him. I looked back once. The man hadn't moved, still standing there in the middle of the road, face turned, paddle in hand. The trees swallowed him behind us. We didn't stop driving until we reached the main highway. And even then, we didn't speak for miles. Back in Vancouver, I tried not to think about it. But some things don't leave you. Not completely. I'm Tom Harris. I'm 31. I live in Detroit, and I make urban exploration videos. The kind where you sneak into abandoned hospitals, collapsed rail depots, or places that look cursed enough to have their own zip code. My girlfriend Rachel is Canadian. She's the one who got me into legends. We were supposed to spend a weekend in the Niagara region shooting light stuff. Drone shots, forest trails, maybe a food vlog in town. But Rachel had this look in her eyes when she mentioned the Screaming Tunnel. She said it was an old railway pass under the woods, tucked outside Niagara on the lake. There's a legend that if you strike a match at midnight inside the tunnel, you'll hear a girl scream. I said, "Let's test it." We arrived around 5 in the evening, did some kayak footage at the river, then drove out to the tunnel by twilight. It was smaller than I expected. Old limestone walls streaked dark from water, the inside swallowing light. I set up the camera while Rachel walked ahead with her flashlight. That's when I heard it. A faint squirk. Not a scream. Not even a voice. More like wet stone shifting. I looked toward the sound but saw nothing. Then, in the camera's viewfinder, I caught a reflection. Small. Faint. Just behind Rachel. It looked like a handprint. Low on the tunnel wall. I blinked, and it was gone. "Probably just mud," I said aloud. Rachel didn't answer. Just gave a short nod. But her eyes looked different after that. We stepped into the tunnel, headlamps on. The echo of our footsteps bounced strangely, like the air was folding in on itself. I made a joke, listened for her scream, and Rachel forced a laugh. I could hear in her voice that she didn't want to be there as much as she had earlier. About halfway in, my light started to flicker. I tapped the casing, twisted the grip. Still dim. Old gear, I muttered. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the dark behind us was pressing closer. We came to a side tunnel, mostly collapsed, but a plank of old wood leaned just wide enough to make an opening. Rachel stepped closer, peered inside. "Looks blocked," she said, but then reached down and pulled something free from the dirt. It was a matchbox. Small, rusted, barely holding together. Inside was a single wooden match. She handed it to me, and I turned it over in my palm. No markings, no logo, just age. I set it on a rock near the wall and kept filming. As we moved deeper, the air changed. Heavier, wetter. The tunnel floor was slick, almost pulpy, and every step echoed like someone else was following a beat behind us. I paused. "You heard that?" I asked. Rachel shrugged, but her face had gone pale. "Probably a deer," she said. We decided to turn back. As we passed the side tunnel again, I noticed the plank looked different, slightly ajar, as if it had been nudged. I stopped, turned on the camera screen, and reviewed the last shot. The plank was closed. Rachel didn't want to talk about it. She walked faster on the way out. By the time we reached the mouth of the tunnel, the sky was nearly dark. We set up camp just beyond the tree line, not far from the entrance. I lit a small fire. Rachel stayed quiet while I reviewed the footage. That's when I saw it. Just for a frame. One single frame. In the corner of the shot, at the far edge of the tunnel behind us, there was a figure. Not moving. Not blurred. Just standing. I froze the frame and leaned closer. No sound of movement. No footsteps caught on audio. Just that still, dark outline. When I showed Rachel, she didn't speak right away. Then she whispered, "We should go." I said we could finish in the morning and leave first thing. I meant it. I didn't want to admit I was scared, but something about the way she looked at me made me promise. We agreed, one more night, and then we go. We packed up early the next morning. The trees were dripping from a light overnight rain, and mist clung low across the trail. Rachel drove while I loaded the camera gear into the trunk. I didn't say anything about the figure. She didn't ask. As we pulled away from the campsite, I glanced back. The tunnel was there, quiet in the trees. Empty. Still. But on the dash cam, just as we curved past it, something white flashed across the mouth. Quick. Too quick for detail. But Rachel saw it too. She said, "What was that?" I answered before thinking. Probably a rabbit. But it wasn't. We should have kept going. We were already out, already safe. But I wanted one last shot, a drone pass above the entrance. Slow pan out into the trees. Rachel hesitated when I asked, but she nodded. "Quick," she said. We pulled over just past the trailhead. I stepped out and unpacked the drone. Rachel stayed near the car, rubbing her arms against the chill. Then, without speaking, she pulled the old matchbox from her coat pocket. She struck the match. The flame flared to life, small and golden in the morning mist. She held it steady just a few feet from the tunnel entrance. That's when it happens. From inside the tunnel, a sound rises. High. Sharp. Not like a human scream. More like a pressure scream. Something in the pitch that hits the back of your throat. The flame dies in her hand. The wind vanishes. We both stared at the mouth of the tunnel. Nothing moved. Rachel whispered. That wasn't wind. We didn't wait. We ran back to the car, slammed the doors, and peeled out onto the gravel. The next 10 minutes were quiet. The road twisted out of the woods and back toward town. I made a joke to break the silence. "Best footage we've ever gotten." Rachel didn't answer. She just looked out the window, one hand gripping the side door. We stopped at a roadside diner. I backed up the footage, double-checked the audio. Nothing strange. No figures. No screams. Just static where the scream should have been. Rachel looked at the motion sensors and said, "Nothing's following us." I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. We got back in the car and kept driving. About 20 minutes later, on a narrow forest road not far from the highway, the headlights caught something ahead. A figure. Standing in the middle of the road, Rachel slammed the brakes. Gravel screeched. The car lurched forward and stopped just short. He was tall, thin, pale in the morning twilight, and he held something in his left hand. The matchbox. Rachel hit the horn. It didn't move. Its face was just shadow and reflection. I shouted. She swerved around him, tires kicking up rocks, and floored it. As we passed, I looked back. He was still standing there, but now he had lifted his arm, waving, slow and steady, like he knew us. Then he stepped back into the trees. We didn't stop again until we reached the city. Back in Detroit, I edited the footage. The scream wasn't there, but in one clip, the one where I joked inside the tunnel, viewers began leaving comments. Things like, "Did anyone else hear that whisper behind Tom?" Or "Watch 237. Someone's standing behind Rachel." Rachel stopped answering texts about the trip. We still talk, but she doesn't come on shoots anymore. She says she's fine, but she started keeping a lock on her bedroom door, even in her own apartment. As for me, I started checking mirrors at night, watching for motion and reflections. I changed out my camera gear, bought new lights, new backups, but I haven't uploaded the tunnel video. Not yet, because we went for a legend, and I'm still wondering if that night, someone, or something, came out chasing us, or worse, followed us home. I used to think I was built for this kind of work. When you drive deep into the forests of British Columbia, out to a logging camp at the end of a gravel road no one remembers, it feels like you're conquering something, like the wilderness is the test. But I learned pretty quick that nature is the easy part. The real test begins when the machines stop. The sky goes dark too early, and you start wondering who else might be watching. My name's Ethan Jackson. I was 28 when I took the job. Came up from Portland for a few months of steady money and quiet. They needed someone for night rotation at a camp up north. Mostly equipment maintenance and off-hour timber transport. The camp was small. A few prefab units for sleeping. One main lodge. A fenced-off area where the bigger gear was kept. There was only one road in. After sundown, everything out there went still. No signals. No backup. The first time it happened, I told myself I was tired. I'd left the skidder running while I finished paperwork in the lodge. It was cold that night, and the cab heater helped take the edge off. When I came back in the morning, the machine was still idling, still warm. And I was sure, absolutely sure, I had turned the key and shut it down, but I let it go. I was new. Maybe I'd missed a step. The days started to blur after that. I got into rhythm, logging shifts, refueling the saws, moving cut piles down toward the trucks. The guys were decent, a little rough, but they worked hard and didn't ask questions. One of them, an older guy named Ray, looked at me on my second week and said, "Don't hang around the machines too long after dark. Things get weird out here when it's quiet." I laughed, figured it was camp talk. One night, after we wrapped up, I walked across the yard to double-check the power lines. One of the portable saws, the big gas one, was still running, sitting out near the gravel, sputtering like someone had just used it. I hadn't touched that saw all day, and no one else was around. I walked up, checked the chain brake. The pull cord was still tight. No wear. No tampering. I shut it off and checked the casing for heat. It was warm, but not burning, like it had been started maybe 5-10 minutes ago. That time, I didn't tell anyone. The forest had started to feel different, like it wasn't just trees anymore, like the silence wasn't real silence, just something waiting to end. At night, I'd hear things. A knock against the light post. A rustle just past the clearing. the sound of gravel shifting when no one was walking. I told the site manager. He barely looked up from his mug and said, "Could be a coyote or wolves this deep." Then he went back to reading. So I told myself the same thing. Just animals. Nothing strange. But something in me started counting sounds, measuring the pauses, trying to catch the pattern. A few nights later, I was doing final checks on the loader when I heard it. Not a rustle. Not distant. A footstep. Heavy and close. Followed by the crack of something. A branch. Maybe. Breaking under weight. I swung my flashlight and stepped into the yard. About 30 meters out. Just beyond the reach of the pole lights. I saw it. A person. Standing still. Not moving. Not talking. Just there. I called out. Nothing. They didn't run. They didn't flinch. They stood behind one of the bigger pine trunks. Only half in view, but I could see the shoulder. The side of the head. Too broad to be one of the crew. I backed up, went straight to the lodge, told the site manager. He stared at me a long second, then said, "I'll check in the morning." And that was it. He told me to sleep in the utility room that night, where it was warmer. Said he'd leave the back light on. I said nothing, but my truck keys were locked in the gear locker. I had no way out even if I wanted to go. I lay there in the dark, listening to the wind scrape across the siding, listening for that footstep again. It never came. Not that night. I decided I was done. The next morning, I told myself I would finish my shift and leave the camp the same day. I didn't care about the paycheck or the hours left on contract. Something was wrong out there, and I wasn't going to wait for it to show up at the door. But when I stepped outside, I stopped cold. Sitting right in front of the machine shed, dead center, on the gravel, was a pair of rubber work gloves. Black, covered in dew. No footprints around them. No sign of who left them or when. They weren't mine, and no one claimed them. I picked them up. They were cold. Too cold for the time of morning. I brought them into the lodge and laid them on the bench. Told the manager what I saw. He nodded. Said, "Sometimes kids mess with the camp. Local hunters, maybe." I said nothing, but there was no way anyone had come down that road without the dogs barking. And those gloves had not been there the night before. Later that day, I was paired with a guy named Sam. He was younger, new like me, maybe a few weeks in. We were assigned to a midfield unit hauling logs. The air was sharp with the smell of pine and engine oil. And for a while, everything felt normal again. Sam joked a lot, talked about the music he missed back home. I listened and let myself believe the unease had passed. The machines were loud, and the forest stayed still. By the time the sun began to drop behind the ridge, we had cleared most of our run. Sam packed up and headed back to the bunk unit. I stayed behind to prep the skidder for the morning. Just routine. No reason to rush. It was quiet out there. The kind of quiet that makes you realize how far you are from anyone. I climbed into the cab and leaned back on the seat. Turned the ignition once to warm the system. The hum of the engine was almost comforting. I didn't mean to fall asleep, but I did. And when I woke up, everything had changed. The cab was dark. The hum of the engine now distant. I heard something else. A sound cutting through the yard. A chainsaw. Running. But not steady. Not being used. Just idling. Teeth rattling. Like someone had started it and stepped away. I sat up. Heart pounding. That saw had been shut down. I flicked on the floodlight mounted to the cab and scanned the clearing. My breath caught. There was movement. Sam. Or what looked like Sam. He was being dragged. Pulled backward across the gravel by someone heavy and fast. His arms flailed once. His boots kicking. His shirt was torn. His shoulders soaked through. I saw his face. Slack. Pale. And then it vanished behind a pile of timber. I jumped out of the cab, grabbed the iron rod from the tool tray, and ran toward the sound. The saw screamed again, then stopped. I turned the corner. My flashlight jittered across trunks and shadow. There he was. A man. Big. Wearing a gray jacket smeared with oil and dust. The words Trucking Co. faded across the back. He had no visible weapon. Just bare hands. One of them clamped around Sam's collar, holding him down. The other reached toward his belt like he was grabbing for something unseen. I didn't wait. I swung the rod hard, striking the man across the back. He grunted but didn't fall. Just turned. His face was partly hidden by a hood, but I saw the eyes. Dead. Unfocused. As if he was looking past me. I swung again, hit his shoulder. He jerked back, stumbling into the logs. I pulled Sam up, half dragging him, half carrying him toward the machine. We climbed inside. I locked the door behind us, hit the ignition. The lights flared. The engine screamed. And in the rear view, the man stood in the beams. Just stood. Then he took one step forward and vanished into the trees. We drove until morning. Neither of us said anything for the first 30 minutes. We just kept watching the tree line, waiting to see if he'd follow again. I left the camp the next day. Sam was airlifted out by the company. He said he remembered almost nothing. Just a figure stepping out of the trees. Then nothing but wait. Back home, I couldn't rest. Every time I heard a skidder engine turn over, my chest locked up. I kept checking under the cab seat, kept looking for those gloves. Sometimes I still think about that man. He never said a word, and I never saw him arrive. I thought I signed up to cut trees, but once the forest is empty, it's not the trees that come back to find you. It's whatever was hiding behind them. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I truly mean that. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you won't miss the next ones. And once again, thank you for walking this dark road with me tonight.